You know, it's been 30 years since Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List was released, and it is still one of the most powerful and, yeah, one of the most debated films ever made. It's a movie that really goes beyond just being a movie. But in doing that, it brings up some really big, profound questions about how we remember the past. Okay, let's dive into this. This quote, this quote right here, it just gets to the absolute heart of the film's impact. I mean, for whole generations of people all around the world, the images in this film aren't just a story about the Holocaust. They've basically become the Holocaust in their minds. You really can't overstate its influence. And that's the central question here, isn't it? When a movie, a fictionalized reenactment, becomes the definitive version of a historical tragedy for so many people, what does that mean? So we're going to explore that tension, that pull between the film's artistic choices and its massive role as a historical document. So how in the world did this film even get made? Well, the story starts with a director who, at the time, was famous for, aliens and adventures, not for historical tragedies. And he was deeply hesitant to even touch this project. Yeah, this did not happen overnight. Universal bought the rights for Spielberg way back in 1982, but then the project just sat there for a decade. And get this, Spielberg felt so unready for it that he offered it to other directors. He asked Roman Polanski, whose own mother died in Auschwitz. He even had Martin Scorsese attached to direct for a while. Spielberg just felt he wasn't the right person for the job. And you don't have to take my word for it. These are his own words. Think about that for a second. The man who could dream up entire worlds, who gave us E.T. and Jaws, felt he wasn't equipped to tackle this part of our own world's history. He was just overwhelmed by the responsibility of it all. So, what changed his mind? Well, scary as it sounds, it was what was happening in the present, not just the past. In the late 80s, Spielberg was watching this resurgence of Nazism, and he was absolutely horrified by polls suggesting that some people were starting to doubt the Holocaust even happened. All of a sudden, his purpose became crystal clear. This film had to be a tool. It had to be a way to fight back against that denial. Okay, so once he had that mission, that purpose, Spielberg made some really deliberate, really specific choices in how he made the film. He wanted to create a feeling of raw, historical truth that would be just impossible to dismiss. He and his cinematographer, Janusz Kaminski, basically threw out the Hollywood playbook. They stripped away all the usual gloss. The black and white, the constant use of handheld cameras, it all gives the film this gritty, newsreel quality. It feels like you're right there. Spielberg said he avoided all his usual tricks, like fancy Steadicams and zooms, because he wanted it to feel spontaneous and real. And this quote from him just explains it perfectly. For Spielberg, the visual memory of the Shoah was in black and white. It was shaped by the documentaries he'd seen, and he wanted us, the audience, to experience the story through that very same historical lens. But of course, there's that one famous exception to the black and white rule: the girl in the red coat. For Spielberg, she was a symbol of the world's willful ignorance. He said that leaders like Roosevelt and Churchill, they knew what was happening, but they did nothing to stop it. It was like the Holocaust itself was wearing red, and still, nobody would look. But here's the thing. Even with all the acclaim and its educational mission, the film sparked this huge, fierce debate that is still going on today. While millions of people praised it, a lot of prominent thinkers and filmmakers had some really sharp criticisms, basically arguing that there are some lines that art should just never cross. So you've got these two totally opposing camps, right? On one side, you have the incredible educational impact. No one can deny that. But on the other side, the criticisms were really serious. First off, should a Holocaust story really center on the redemption of a Nazi party member? And second, and this is a big one, was it okay to use Hollywood suspense techniques in that infamous shower scene to create tension out of a moment of such absolute terror? Nobody voiced this criticism more powerfully than Claude Lanzmann. He's the director of the 9.5-hour documentary Shoah. And for Lanzmann, who deliberately used no archival footage, no reenactments in his own film, any attempt to fictionalize the Holocaust was just wrong. Full stop. To restage these horrors with actors, for him, that wasn't honoring the victims, it was trivializing the untellable. So how do you possibly reconcile these two powerful opposing views? Well, in the years since the film came out, a new perspective has kind of emerged. One that sees the film not as perfect history and not as perfect cinema, but as something else entirely. So check out this number. Over 55,000. What is that? Well, after making the film, Spielberg was a changed man. He used his own money to start a foundation to record the testimonies of Holocaust survivors. And that foundation has now collected over 55,000 visual histories from survivors and witnesses. And as Spielberg himself says, this incredible, permanent record, one of the most important historical archives in the entire world, it's a direct legacy of the film. So the movie didn't just tell a story, it created an institution that's dedicated to preserving thousands and thousands of real stories. And that brings us to the film's ultimate legacy. Many now argue that we shouldn't really see it as cinema, but as a public memorial. It wasn't built with granite or stone, it was built with the most powerful tools Hollywood has to offer. Crafted by one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, to create a shared space for all of us to remember. So, we're left with this question. Look, Schindler's List may not be a perfect historical document, and its artistic choices are still things we can and should debate, but when you think of it as a memorial, one that has shaped our collective memory and preserved tens of thousands of real testimonies, well, its place in history is just undeniable. The debate it started 30 years ago is one we're definitely still having today.